Now, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has said that the prison capacity crisis is much worse than he feared.
Yes, this as his government prepares to release tens of thousands of inmates early in a bid to prevent jails becoming full.
Well, he's expected to authorise emergency measures this week, which could see criminals automatically freed after serving just 40% of their sentence.
So how worried should we be here? Here to discuss all of this is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, we knew that our prisons were, at quite a high capacity at the moment, but releasing prisoners early, this is a difficult one for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, we did know that the prison sector was in a dire state. And actually, from last October, Alex Chalk, the former Conservatives Justice Secretary, was releasing prisoners early on a sort of ad hoc basis. The difference between that and what Keir Starmer is proposing is whereas the Conservative government that came before wanted to keep prisoners in for as much of their sentence as possible, but had to release them here and there because of massive overcrowding issues, Keir Starmer is actually working towards a new model where prisoners do serve shorter sentences. And he is also talking about potentially ruling out those very short sentences altogether. So there would be no more times when people spend, weeks or just a couple of months in prison. There is some evidence that that might be a good step forward in that the reoffending rates for prisoners who've gone into prison for just a few months is quite high. They do tend to get on a sort of reoffending cycle. But of course, the worry for members of the public is that if prisoners are released within just after 40% of their sentences, you could have potentially violent offenders reoffending on the streets again quite soon, really. There have been questions to Shabana Mahmood, the new Justice Secretary, over whether the 40% rule would include violent prisoners, and she hasn't been able to rule out that violent prisoners might be released early. So that could potentially be a big worry. And of course, it would be a huge headache for this new government if after making a song and dance of releasing prisoners after just 40% of their sentence, a violent offender does reoffend. That would mean the first bad headlines for this new government since the election.
I'm looking at some of these reoffending rates right now, and they really are shocking. I mean, according to the latest official data, which is from 2022, more than half of all prisoners who serve a sentence of less than 12 months provably reoffend. So that's just the ones that we catch and charge again. A quarter of people who are in prison for 1 to 4 years provably reoffend once they're released. I wonder if the issue isn't that we're sending people to prison for too short a time, for too long a time. Surely it's that they're not in there long enough.
Well, that is the argument which plenty of Conservative backbenchers have made. Interestingly, though, actually, the approach that this Labour government is taking isn't very different to the Conservative Justice Secretaries who came before, who tended to be sort of slightly more on the left of the Conservative Party, like David Gauke or Alex Chalk. But the difference is that this time, the Labour government, it all seems to be united in a sort of bid to get prisoners released early. And, of course, James Timpson, the head of Timpson's key-cutting company, has now been appointed as prison minister, and he has done plenty of pretty controversial interviews where he sort of argues that far too many people are in prison at all, far fewer people should be receiving custodial sentences. I mean, this is not the sort of language which was used on the election campaign. In fact, during the election campaign, both parties, as is sort of tradition, were very keen to show that they were tough on law and order. So is this perhaps the beginning of a U-turn from the new Labour government?
Thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley, GB News political correspondent. Tom, I don't know about you, but this sounds very much like going soft on crime. Very risky business. If, as Olivia suggests, might happen, if one of these offenders goes on to reoffend in a violent manner, then essentially the government can be accused of putting all of us at risk. This is a very risky business. Surely the emphasis should be on what problems are in the prison system as it stands. Why are people reoffending? Not just let them out early.
Absolutely, and we could be deporting foreign criminals more. We could be building more prison spaces. Some countries are even renting prison spaces from other countries that have more space in their prisons.
Why don't we do that?
There are options that we could explore here, but no, we're going to release people early.
No,
it
just seems like we care more about the human rights of those who commit the crimes rather than the rest of us who have to live with the criminals or live with the threat of crime. Anyway.